Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of All the Sketch Cards, a podcast or video series dedicated to nothing but sketch cards. My goal here is to be set agnostic, so I'll touch upon Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Middle Earth, Perna Studios, Iconic. Pretty much every set that's out there is fair game. If it's a sketch card, it's welcome here, and so are you as a fan or potential fan of sketch cards. For sets from 2009 forward, I can speak with fair amount of personal knowledge. And for any of the older sets where it was a little before my time, I'll try to bring in collectors and artists who've got a deeper reservoir of knowledge. And I'll absolutely have an episode dedicated to the history of sketch cards, including talking about the first sketch cards produced and some of the fun debates around what constitutes first, but that's for another episode. In this first one, and really in all of them, I mean, let's be honest, I'm going to bounce around a lot. That's just how my mind works. But I really hope to be more of a facilitator who brings in experts and lets other people talk rather than just offering a constant monologue of my own personal views and opinions, because nobody wants that, including myself, because that's just not fun. That's just talking in a quiet room and broadcasting it later. So while there's tons of videos out there on this, let's just start with the basics because it still comes up in some of the Facebook groups that I'm involved with. So let's just go right to the basics. What's a sketch card? In most cases, it refers to a 2.5 inch by 3.5 inch trading card, usually cardboard, with hand drawn artwork, as an example right here. The size is just the industry standard trading card size, so there's nothing inherently special about the standard sketch card. Um, and from here, really, there's a bunch of forks we can take, but why don't we start with PSCs versus officially licensed? So let's, while most of the time I will be talking about officially licensed sketch cards, meaning they're released by a company and may or may not involve an official licensed IP or intellectual property. Let's quickly review what are called personal sketch cards or PSCs, sometimes also called ACOs, ACEO, which stands for Art Cards, Editions, and Originals. So if you search for either of those terms on eBay, you'll find a bunch of the non-pack inserted licensed cards. And a PSC is really just a sketch card on any surface which doesn't have some sort of contract or official license behind it. It can be a simple pencil sketch on a blank sketch card. Uh, it could be, and that could have nothing on the back. It could literally just be a cutout piece of paper. It could have the artist's info on it, so it could be branded by the artist with either their branding on the back or sometimes, like this one by Art of Shade, has branding on both sides. So when you look at the front, you can immediately tell who it is as opposed to just looking for the signature. It can also be custom stock created by a collector. I actually created two different stocks myself when I was working on my Lord of the Rings storybook project. So there's some examples of those. But at the end of the day, a PSC is just a sketch done on a stock created by someone other than a trading card company, is the best way to describe it. If we go back to licensed sketch cards, we've got a little fork there where we can talk about two different things. We have your standard pack pulled, and then we have artist proofs, which are formerly called artist returns. Why don't we talk about those real quick? Because that seems to be where a lot of the biggest questions come around sketch cards. People like, what is this artist proof or AP stuff? It's basically cards that are given to an artist as part of their compensation, and they're allowed to sell them directly to collectors. So a typical contract might say that an artist gets $5 per card that'll go into a pack. And then for every 10 cards, they also get this special card, blank artist proof that they're able to commission out. So these days, artist proofs are just standard size sketch cards, and there's some way you can tell they're an artist proof versus a normal pack inserted card. And that is important because there are some collectors who value pack inserted cards more differently than artist proofs. I'm not one of them myself, but some collectors do value those a little less. I know one who even says it's sort of cheating when you're collecting because you can commission it the way you want as opposed to having to chase down a specific character by a specific artist in a specific set. You don't have that hunt. Um, so how do you tell it's an artist proof? Most of the time, like right here, I keep putting my hand on the wrong side. I'll get used to the camera. Um, you see that a lot of the upper deck cards now have some sort of an AP stamped on the front to differentiate them. Here's an example from Cryptozoic, who takes a different approach. They actually give holographic stickers to the artists who put them on the back of the cards they want to keep as their artist proof. And even going back to Marvel Masterpieces back in the 2007 and 2008 A and B sets, you can see here the way they differentiated them is there were different color borders and color schemes on the front and back. So it didn't say AP, but you could see from the different coloring that it stood out and that it was an artist proof. And then there were other differentiators in the 2009 to 2015 range when Rittenhouse had the set. They provided oversized, uncut stock to the artists. And typically it had the artist's name on the back with a sticker. And these are interesting because early on, these are actually how all cards were provided to the artists. And then the cards would be cut down in the manufacturing process. And I believe that stopped after a few sets and they were sent just the pre-cut cards to work on. So again, some more examples there. Um, not sure where else to go here. We'll talk about some of the other sizes in a second. So again, so now that we've talked about APs a little, let's just take a step back and talk about sketch cards and different ways they can use them. So for example, a sketch card, here's just another random example, is typically just a standalone image as well. But as you can see here, artists can actually put multiple cards together to create larger pieces and puzzles. Um, in the early days of Rittenhouse and even the few examples of puzzles back in 2007, 2008 masterpieces, puzzles were broken up. So you would, if it was a 3-card puzzle, you would only pull 1/3 of it and you would have to chase down those. And these were back in the days of Scoundrel, where, you know, that was your best bet to try and meet up with someone, or you hope and pray that it shows up on eBay. But you definitely needed help to search those out. I probably have 50 uncompleted puzzles in my collection from various sets. Um, but eventually, card companies began putting a full puzzle into packs. So, for example, in Bronze Age, I had one pack where I got all 6 pieces of a Glee puzzle, all complete, which obviously was much more collector friendly. Um, but even now, there have been some examples where they've trended back because Upper Deck, for example, is very much, I'll say, against puzzles, only because I know in the contracts artists are specifically asked not to do that. But some do workarounds. One that comes to mind is in Masterpieces 2020. Andre Ausch did some 2-card puzzles, which fit together, but each was a very distinct standalone. So they would pass the test. If you got one, you wouldn't, if you didn't know it was a puzzle, you wouldn't be pining for the other half. But as soon as you did, obviously you'd want to track it down and get the full piece. It's not surprising from a card company's perspective. You know, every puzzle that they don't have to put is just, that's 2 individual cards and that they can put in packs, and, you know, a little less they need to pay for in the long run. So that was a long, rambling talk about puzzles. I think that's going to be a theme in some of these videos. So let's talk about different sizes as well. So I'm not 100% sure it was quite this linear, but in 2012, Marvel Premiere is the first example that pops to mind of taking a puzzle concept to the next step when they introduced multi-panel sketch cards. So these were cards that were designed and cut specifically for larger pieces. And in 2012, they released dual panel booklets like this with the hinge in the middle that could fold. They also introduced triple panel sketch cards where it was 3 cards all linked together. So instead of 2.5 by 3.5, it was actually 7.5 by 3.5. And then they also added a quad, which is 4 individual sketch cards all together in one piece. And I guess that would be 10 inches by 3.5 inches. And then even going a step further, when the 2017 set was released, then they also introduced a 5x7 sketch card, which is one of the bigger ones. It is larger than the Rittenhouse APs, which were, I believe, 4x5 at the time. And if I can figure out the editing, I'll show the 2 of them side by side here. If not, this will just really look odd, like I'm floating my hand out here for nothing. The dual booklets are interesting because they are designed to fold very easily. In theory, the triples and the quads can fold, but since they don't have the built-in sort of little space that the dual one does, I'm not a fan of that at all. I only have one which was folded. I try to keep them all flat. And even with the dual, here are 2 examples here where one artist kind of left it blank and you have that sort of gap in the middle, and then one where the artist actually drew on the gap to sort of make it look like one continuous image. My own personal take is if the 2 sides are done as one image and there's just this jarring gap in the middle of it, and I'll use this Magic as an example, which I absolutely love. It's a Bella and it's a phenomenal card, but that white gap, I won't lie, drives me crazy. I think leaving the white gap is much better suited if you're doing 2 very distinct images that are sort of done side by side there. Again, personal taste there. And just taking a quick sidestep, I did talk a lot about Marvel Premiere there. If you are a sketch fan, while it is expensive and higher end, Marvel Premiere really is often the best value for your dollar because in one box, which again can run in the high 200s, but you're guaranteed both a standard size sketch and an oversized sketch, either a double, triple, quad, or 5x7. So knowing that you're going to get 2 every time there is a big plus. And that really is their sketch focused set that they release, with the next one planned for sometime this year. 2021 will be the next set. Again, they did those in 2012, 17, 19, and now 21. Maybe there was a 15 in there. I don't think so. If there is, I don't have any, so I doubt there was, but you never know. Okay, then let's talk about other types of cards, because there are some other companies who have experimented. There have been Upper Deck's done both plexiglass and metal sketch cards, both of which, again, very original and nice variations to experiment with. But from what I've heard, were absolute nightmares to work on with the surfaces, very slippery in a lot of cases. Tops definitely in the Star Wars sets, for example, did some die cut sketch cards. So I know there was one that was shaped like a stormtrooper. There was one that was shaped like BB-8. So it was an interesting take there. Cryptozoic experimented on their Adventure Time set by including a blank sketch card that was it said fan sketch card, and the idea was you would go and commission the artist to do the work right on there, sort of a hybrid between the artist proof and the pack inserted cards. But it was another great intention, but poor execution, because the surface was very slick, and outside of paint or sanding it down, it was very hard for artists to get anything to stick to it, especially since the vast majority of artists, at least my understanding, is use Copics are sort of the standard marker of choice, and those would just run right off the surface. Again, great idea. I'm a little shocked from a licensing perspective that they were ever able to do that, because it bypassed the entire approval process, which, especially when it came to Adventure Time, ended up being quite a conundrum. But that's a different episode that I'll enjoy talking about at some point. Um, and that's probably a good segue into the underlying IPs, or again, intellectual properties of your favorite sets. I think it'll be helpful for a real quick overview of the process that the artists need to go through. As an example here, I'm not going to go too deep into the business side, even though I would love to, but just a high level review of sort of who owns what and how it impacts the cards. So when you think about your favorite shows and characters, those are broadly referred to as intellectual property, or IP. So Disney, as an example, Disney owns Star Wars and Marvel. So they have the characters, the rights to them, and including in the movies, the rights to the likenesses of the actors. Um, and even within there, though, Disney opened a can of worms, because Disney has side deals with Sony, who own a lot of the rights to the Spider-Verse. So there are a lot of fun issues there. And that's why sometimes a lot of characters have areas where they're banned, like the Fantastic Four has not been allowed on sketch cards for ages because of licensing rights, although the rumor is that will be ending pretty soon. And even then, there are also rights for regions. So the card companies, Upper Deck, for example, has the rights to, I'm not sure if it's only United States. I would guess it's North America, so Canada and Mexico as well. But other companies have the rights, for example, in the UK. So that's why Upper Deck can't sell directly in the UK. So don't want to get too far into that. So we talked about the Fantastic Four. Let's see. So typically the way it works is card company, let's say I started my own company, and I won the lottery, so I've got boatloads of cash, and I want to go to get the Marvel rights. So I would go to Disney, and I would sign an agreement with them saying I want to produce these trading cards, and it all comes down to a fee structure. So I'll either pay a flat fee or a royalty based on my sales, or some combo of both, in exchange for the rights to do those cards. And why that's important for this discussion is, in that contract, there are all of the restrictions on what I can and can't do. So which characters I can't use, what the characters can and can't do. So for example, with Marvel, you can't show characters smoking. You can't point a gun directly at the viewer. Obviously, modesty comes into play with some of the characters. Um, so those rules are inherent in there, and either Disney itself, or if they've delegated to Upper Deck, there is an approval process where when the sketch cards come in, they have to be reviewed to make sure they're abiding by those rules. And that holds on both the pack inserted cards and the artist proofs as well. Those have to go through the same approval process. And anyone who's commissioned an artist proof knows that these days that can be a gut-wrenchingly painful process waiting for that, because the card companies, once they have their pack inserted, unfortunately are just not particularly incented to take time out of their day to approve those ABs. That in and of itself is a whole episode to go into, that whole process. So gotten a little off track there. But we've talked to again, this might be a good point to wrap it up. We've talked about official license versus PSCs. We've talked about pack inserted versus artist proofs. And I guess the quick way I would wrap up on artist proofs is, this is really the way the artists get the vast majority of their compensation. They do not make a lot as far as the pack inserted cards. So if you have an artist that you enjoy and a character you want, I highly recommend patronizing the artist directly. I think with artist proofs, you can make sure you get what you're looking for. You can work with them and be very specific about the scene, the pose, or you can take the approach I do in a lot of cases where, I give very broad descriptions and I sort of trust the artist and the process. Some people like both sides. There are inherent risks to taking a much more hands-off approach, but I've been fortunate with the artists I've worked with. I've been happy 99% of the time with what I get. But some people are very picky and really want to micromanage the process. I think it's just a question of, talk to these artists. They'll talk to you about their rates, and then work with them to get what you want. I think that's what keeps this whole cycle of art going. What keeps these artists in the sketch card game, as you will, and ultimately what helps us all as collectors, making sure there are these great pack inserted cards, because if the artists know that they're going to make good money on the artist proofs, they'll spend more time working on the pack inserted cards to sort of highlight their own work, and essentially advertise what they're able to do for other things. So again, we talked about that. We talked about different sizes, some of the experimental surfaces. But in the end, to wrap it all up, a sketch card is a trading card that has art from an artist on it. And it's typically a very cost-effective way to enjoy art and collect pieces of these different intellectual properties and shows and series that we all love. So let's wrap it up there. As I go forward with this, I'll start focusing on specific artists, specific sets, characters. I'll try to bring in some artists to have some conversations. So again, it's not just me talking over and over. And hopefully this will be a little educational, a little fun, probably a little cringy as well, but some mix of all three. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to sharing my love of this hobby with you. So enjoy your sketches, but don't be sketchy. Thanks.